With our readings today, I was thinking of that phrase that love is blind. And I thought, well, what if I Google love is blind? Like, what would that bring up? I was sort of wondering. So if you Google love is blind, the first thing that pops up is a reality series called Love is Blind. Now, a couple things here. One, I've never actually seen any episodes of this show. I just watched a lot of trailers from the different seasons. And two, just because I mentioned something in a homily doesn't mean that's an endorsement to go out and see it. So it seems to be like one of those just sort of trashy reality romance shows, like so many others. So the crux of this show that I've gathered is that they take men and women and they put them in these little pods, they call them, and then they spend time just maneuvering between the pods and talking to one another like through this barrier, like through this screen. And then eventually, in coming to know them well enough, they decide it's time for a marriage proposal. And then only after they're engaged does the screen come up and they're finally able to see one another. So what could go wrong, right? And especially, then they take all these engaged couples and they put them like in this big like house or something together, like Big Brother or something, just for the added drama. Now, from what I gather, most of these engagements don't pan out. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, although by doing that, I guess you'll have admitted that you watched the show. But it's sad in some ways, right, to even in the trailers see these broken-hearted people, who had been obviously looking for love, for connection, for a relationship, to just have it sort of end in a disaster. These are real people, and so it's heartbreaking in that way, although they're set up by the entertainment industry to have this happen to them, I guess. And of course, it's not a bad thing that this set up that we shouldn't be judging other people just based on their looks and things like that. But obviously, this whole thing doesn't work out. This whole way of figuring out that love is blind, and that's the basis of a good, strong, committed relationship. Of course, we also use the term love is blind when we're maybe so taken by someone, so in love, smitten, that we just overlook, their faults, which again, it's not bad to focus on people's faults. But, as we're trying to get to grow in a relationship, there's things that we just need to figure out are going to work or not work, and, are there red flags or whatever? And so this love is blind doesn't typically, I don't think, lead to, again, a good, solid, permanent, committed relationship. So, God, as we know, is love. So we can ask, well, if love is supposed to be blind, even though we just discussed how that doesn't really work out, if love is blind and God is love, was God blind? I think no. So I think love, that authentic, true, full, complete love that God is, actually sees. So authentic love is not blind, it actually sees. But it sees more fully and completely. It knows. Love knows, and love comes to understand. So this God of ours, in his love, he sees us with all of our faults, but sees who we really are and who he has made us to be, who he has called us to be, and really the new creation that he looks to make us into. We see this in our first reading from 1 Samuel with the call of David. So Saul was the king of Israel. He was God's chosen one. He was anointed, but Saul just didn't have love for God really in his heart, and he just sort of do his own thing. And so even though Saul, he kind of fit the bill as a king, out of central casting, whatever, tall, dark, and handsome, in his heart, he didn't truly have a deep love for God. So God was looking for someone after his own heart. It says in 1 Samuel 13:14. And so God looks into the heart of David, this young shepherd boy. David, who had a great love and passion for people. If you know the story of David, sometimes he had too much of a passion for some people. But David was also able to forgive those who were really out to get him. And David, God saw, had a great love for God. This David who, when the Ark of the Covenant came into Jerusalem, he just danced with abandon for joy. So God looked into the heart of David and saw love for God. And he was able to do something with that. And so he anointed David, had Samuel anoint David king. And it says the Spirit, once he was anointed, the Spirit filled him and remained with him each day. Now for the prophets, as we proclaim in our creed, the prophets encountered the Holy Spirit, but like as needed basis, if God had a message for his people. But David was different. The Holy Spirit was with him then all the time. It's like the Holy Spirit is with us all the time through our own recreation in baptism. And so we have this then in the gospel, this man who was born blind. It says Jesus was going to pass by and he saw him. So again, Jesus is God, and God is love, and love sees. So it says Jesus saw this man who was born blind, saw into who he was and who he was capable of becoming. A disciple of the Lord who lived and walked in his light. So he has this man, of course, do the thing with the spit and the clay and put on his eyes and go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is actually way across town. So this guy had to have a lot of faith to have been unable to see, and he has to kind of walk around town to this pool. How many steps are? All right. But in his faith, his trust, his hope, really his love for God, is what enabled him to see, because love sees. This man, too, he's unnamed, especially in the Gospels. When someone's unnamed, we're especially supposed to put ourselves in that place. And so for each of us to think about this man who was born blind, and the idea, as we saw in the beginning, that there's maybe a sin that someone could possibly be born into. That's sort of all of us, born into the fallout of Adam and Eve, that we need saved from. Like the man born blind, we just can't do on our own. It says unheard of that anyone has been healed from being born blind. The prophets did all sorts of other things. They split the Red Sea, they called down fire, they healed lepers, they even raised people from the dead. But even the prophets were unable to open the eyes of someone who was blind, because that's what Jesus came to do. To free us from darkness of anything that separates us from the love of God. And he gives us, and he sees us, that ability in us, that ability to become a new creation. That new creation that we become in baptism. And we see glimpses of that in our passage when Jesus brings light to the man's eyes. The same God who at the dawn of creation said, "Let there be light." This man who takes clay and puts it on his eyes is the same God who took clay and formed humanity in Genesis. So if we have echoes of creation in our gospel today, we know it's because God has come to bring a recreation, not only to this man, but to us all, and has through our baptism. And this special time of Lent here is a time to reclaim that for ourselves, for the gift that it is. That God sent his Holy Spirit to bring us new life. This God who has made us children of the light. So with this man born blind, he finally comes to recognize who Jesus is. He says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He goes, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe?" And he says, "You have seen him," because love sees. Sees who God is, sees who we are in God. And the man then, he worshiped him after his encounter with Christ. So too here in the Mass, with our encounter of Christ, it's our great act of worship. Knowing who God is, knowing who we are in God. And that through the light that Christ shines upon us, St. Paul says we can know every kind of goodness and righteousness and truth.